This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, high-performance cloud hosting for everyone. Visit linode.com/MacVoices and take $20 off your first server package. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're back on the Take Control train, this time with the head engineer, Mr. Joe Kissell. Joe, welcome. It's good to see you.
Nice to be here as always.
It's been too long. I feel like we're falling down on the job or something, that I'm not getting you on enough.
You see these abrasions here?
Yeah.
Nose to the grindstone, baby. I've been working hard. I've been doing stuff. I do this all the time. You, the viewing audience, can't see this, but I'm looking over here at this big whiteboard with a bunch of Post-it notes on it because that's how I roll. I don't use Trello. I use the old-fashioned Trello, and there are 33 Post-it notes on there representing either new or updated books that are currently in our queue. Like we want to get through these as quickly as possible, ideally by the end of the year. Now, those of you with calendars might recognize that there are fewer than 33 weeks left in the year. And even like, if we're going at top speed, like occasionally we could do a book a week for a while, or in exceptional circumstances, sometimes we'll release 2 books in a single week, but we can't keep up with this. So we just, we got people working, I'm working on stuff. Other authors are working on stuff. We got all these books that are going to either be written or updated for Big Sur and iOS 14, iPadOS 14, and entirely new stuff that nobody's ever heard of before. And we're just like, we're writing, we're editing, we're fixing, but we're doing all this stuff. And it's not evident really to the outside world, but August, September, October, November are going to be some pretty frantic months around here, and lots of updates are going to come out during that time. So you will soon see the evidence of our labors.
Great. Well, that just means that we'll get to visit more often with you and with the other Take Control authors about specific topics.
Yes.
This time, though, we're going to talk about your latest edition of Take Control of iCloud, 7th edition. 7th edition, Joe.
This is our. It's mind-blowing. This is our first 7th edition. In the olden days, our old website was only able to accommodate up to 5 editions, and when Adam and Tanya sold the business to me, they're like, Joe, you're going to have to figure out something for when you get to 6 editions. So I did some engineering. I paid for engineering to be done to accommodate up to 10 editions. And our new site now accommodates up to 10 editions. But at the rate we're going, a few years from now, we might have to change those rules too. I mean, who could have imagined? I wrote Take Control of .Mac back in 2007. 13 years ago. And then a couple years passed, that turned into Take Control of Mobile Me. That went on for a few years and then turned into Take Control of iCloud. We're now into the 7th edition of that. And to be honest, the book hasn't been updated in a long time. It probably could have been to the 8th edition now if I had actually been a little bit more on the ball. But anyway, Apple keeps changing stuff. And so here we are, 7th edition. No idea how long this is going to go on for, but probably not another 13 years. But anyways, we're up to 7th edition now.
Well, what's interesting to me is I remember standing in line to get my .Mac name at Macworld when it launched. And to think about it being 13 years old is sort of mind-blowing. And I know that .Mac, then, .me and all that. But now it feels like iCloud is probably at its peak, that it's more useful than ever. In fact, I think it's almost become a borderline essential part of the Mac and iPad OS and iOS.
Oh, yeah. It's gotten to the point where it's really hard to do anything without iCloud. And I do have people that write from time to time and they say, I just don't want to use cloud anything. I don't trust Apple. I don't want to have anything. I don't even want to have an iCloud account. I don't want to turn these things on. I'm like I think more than most people, I understand privacy concerns, written a few books about it, but Apple has designed all of their devices, all of their operating systems to be heavily dependent on the cloud. And that's not a bad thing. You get a lot of benefits out of this. I mean, iCloud, as I always say, like, it's not really a thing. It's not like an app. It's not like a thing in a box that you can point at and say, that is iCloud. No, iCloud is just a label for all these different infrastructure things. And you're supposed to not think about it. It's like you got plumbing in the walls, you got pipes, and you don't really think about the pipes normally. You shouldn't have to. You think about them when there's a leak or when water isn't coming out, or, water isn't sinking from, wait a minute. But,
ouch.
But yeah, you think, sink problems basically, or when you think about plumbing, but that's how Apple wants iCloud to be. It's just the invisible plumbing that makes all the things work. You would hate to not have it, and you do need to know, like, which way do you turn the knob to get the right kind of thing to come out. But when it's working, it's supposed to be mostly invisible. But it's hard to use Apple stuff without it.
Okay, so there are a lot of things that we could talk about here, and we only have limited time, of course. So let me ask the big question, I think, that is the elephant in the room for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Can iCloud now, in its current incarnation, replace Dropbox? Could I get rid of Dropbox? Or is that not the question we should ask? Joe puts his head down and fades under the table.
Well, so what you're talking about is the new feature that was introduced several months ago, which is folder sharing. So iCloud Drive has been around for years, and so you can put a file in a folder on a device and have that file appear on your other devices, which of course is part of what Dropbox has always done. One thing that iCloud couldn't do until a few months ago was do the same thing, not just with individual files, but with folders. You can say, hey, friend, colleague, coworker, whatever, here is access to this whole folder. Any file I put in that, you get access to. Any file you put in it, I have access to. Maybe it's read-write, maybe it's read-only. Maybe you want it open to the public. Maybe you want to restrict it to only certain people, give different people different kinds of permissions. Okay, so those are all things that Dropbox has been able to do like forever. And iCloud didn't used to be able to do those. Now it can do those. And what's crazy about that is that Apple basically didn't change the user interface at all. Sharing folders looks exactly like sharing files. It is the same menus, the same dialogues, like everything looks exactly the same. It's just that now it works on folders too. So that's fine. And if your manner of using Dropbox is exclusively to get your files amongst your different Apple devices in sync and to share files and folders with other people who are, also Apple users, then the answer is maybe yes. Maybe iCloud can replace Dropbox for you. Now, when I found out that this folder sharing feature was coming, I was really excited because, of course, I've used Dropbox for many years, and we use it in the take control world. Like, this is how authors and editors and the publisher all share stuff together. We have shared Dropbox folders, one folder for each book. And then there are subfolders within there, and then we have, I won't go into our whole system. But anyway, this is how we share stuff amongst each other, and it's worked out really great. And I thought, oh well, if we can now switch to iCloud Drive for all these things, then I could get rid of Dropbox. I wouldn't have to have it anymore, and that would be one less expense, one less app. Wouldn't that be great? Except there are a few gotchas. So one of the gotchas is the more stuff you put in iCloud Drive, you're going to have to pay for more storage. You're going to have to pay Apple for more storage. Most of us can't get by with the 5 gigabytes that we get for free. then there are different tiers. If you use it pretty seriously, like I do, you're probably going to have to go for the top 2 terabyte level. So there is that. Now, I mean, of course, if you're not paying Dropbox anymore for the same thing, that's great, but it's something to be aware of. Dropbox has a lot of other features, however, that are not just storing and syncing and sharing files and folders. I mean, it has photo sync from your whatever device you plug in. It has this thing called Dropbox Paper, which is sort of like a shared notes kind of environment. Dropbox has recently added a real-ish backup feature in addition to their version history. Now they have like a backup feature. And there's like a whole long list of additional things that Dropbox does. So if you use those other things, then that might be a problem. Another thing, though, is I have a lot of Dropbox folders that I have shared, either I have shared with other people or other people have shared with me, and those other people aren't Apple users. So if somebody has shared a Dropbox folder with me and they as a person don't use Apple stuff, or they work for a company that is not on Apple stuff, I can't really ask them to please get yourself an Apple ID, set up an iCloud account, and move all this stuff over there just for me. So in terms of working with stuff that other people have shared, that's a problem. In terms of syncing my own stuff between my devices, most of the apps that I use do support iCloud directly, but some of them don't. Some of them can only do syncing by way of Dropbox, or they support both, but they work better with Dropbox, or something. So as I look through my Dropbox folder here, and I think about all the different items in there, I'm like, okay, well, that could go to iCloud Drive. That could go to this. And I start getting stuck. So for me personally, I would prefer to move most of my stuff over to iCloud Drive, and I certainly can move a large percentage of it over. But getting to the point where everything is off Dropbox is, I mean, I can do the stuff that's within my control. It's just that not everything is within my control, because it's stuff that either other people have shared, or it's stuff that's part of apps that don't directly support iCloud. So the answer is kind of maybe you can switch, maybe not. I think that with each passing year, it probably becomes more likely that you can switch, but not quite there yet for everybody.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And as you were going through some of the things that Dropbox offers now, I couldn't help but think, there are analogs in, maybe not in iCloud specifically, but maybe like the notes thinking. I know it's not quite a collaborative environment, but it's pretty darn close. And their new password thing, well, of course, you've got Keychain on the Mac. So, your answer was really good, because I like the maybe, and it's possible.
Well, both Dropbox and Apple are trying to do the same thing. Is they're trying to give you more features in their thing that you can't live without, that you get used to and dependent on, so that you're stuck with them. So to the extent that you say, oh, well, I wasn't using Dropbox, but now that it has this new password feature, I think I'm going to use that instead of 1Password or whatever the other thing is. And that's exactly what Dropbox wants you to do, so that you're not tempted to move all your stuff off of there onto iCloud Drive, and they can continue getting your money. And of course, Apple is doing the same thing. Apple would much rather you pay them for iCloud storage and keep all your devices in their world than to use their competitors. So, I mean, I'm not trying to paint any particular entity here as a good guy or a bad guy. This is just what happens. And if your objective is to save money, or to simplify your life and have fewer apps, you want to just think very carefully about how these different companies are sucking you into their ecosystems.
This edition of MacVoices is supported by Linode. Need a virtual server? You can build it on Linode. Linode specializes in cloud computing, making it easy for anyone to get their website or online service up and running quickly and to keep it running. How do they do it? By providing a huge variety of one-click installs for things like WordPress, Drupal, WooCommerce, Plesk, OpenVPN, Prometheus, Arc, and many more. Then they keep it running, and keep it running fast, with industry-leading processors, a 40 gigabit network, and SSD storage. And if you need help deploying your site or your service, or to keep it running at peak efficiency, you can take advantage of the extensive library of guides, tutorials, a community of Linode users, a support bot, and their 24/7 365 customer support. Find out more about Linode and all they offer, because I can't cover it all here no matter how hard I try. Visit linode.com/MacVoices and get $20 off your first server. That's linode.com/MacVoices and $20 off your first server. You've been putting off that project. Now it's time to get it done at linode.com/MacVoices and save $20 doing it. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices. It is interesting how everybody's trying to build an ecosystem. More ecosystems, less products. Something.
Well, and it's not just that, like Dropbox and iCloud, sure, there's also like Adobe. Of course, Adobe wants you to pay $1 million every month for Creative Cloud. And all the video streaming services, everybody, Netflix has their exclusive things, and Apple has their exclusive things, and Hulu has their exclusive things, and CBS, and the whole long list. And so all the people that are like, I don't want cable bundles anymore. I just want to stream everything. Now they're back to where they started, because you still have to buy, five different streaming services to get all the stuff you want. It's like this universally. Everybody wants to sell you stuff, and everybody wants to have exclusive stuff and lock you into their little world. So,
yeah,
what can I say?
Okay, so speaking of ecosystems and products and all, this might be an iCloud question. This might be a Catalina Big Sur question. I'm not sure. But how do you feel about the option of keeping your files, your desktop, in other words, on iCloud?
Yeah.
Sharing it.
I feel negatively about that.
I knew you did in the past, and I was kind of curious to see if it's changed.
I still do. So part of what's driving this is that years before Apple came up with this feature where you can sync your desktop and documents folder to iCloud, I already had a way to do that. And I used software that used to be called BitTorrent Sync. Then it was like sold to a different company and renamed and whatever. Now it's called Resilio Sync. But it's very secure. It uses the same underlying technology as BitTorrent, which is to say, instead of you sync your stuff from your computer up to the cloud and then from the cloud down to another device, it's peer-to-peer. Your stuff is going directly from one of your devices to another, and it's all encrypted and everything. So it's faster, it's more secure, and there is never a worry about running out of storage, because nothing's stored in the cloud. Things are only stored on your devices. And you're not limited to desktop and documents. You can sync any old folders you want. So I had this set up years and years ago, and I'm like, this is great. This works well for me. So then the iCloud thing came along, the documents, desktop and document syncing. And I tried it, and I hated it. So there were a few things. Number one is, if you're doing this with more than one Mac, it is really kind of an awkward procedure to set it up, because you got to you have a different desktop folder, different documents folder in the iCloud drive for each of your Macs. And then you have to manually merge all the stuff and then get rid of the extra folders. It's a hassle. And if you decide later on to turn this off, you have to reverse that whole hassle. I found that the syncing was much slower than I would like, and much slower than I was used to, partly because everything has to make this round trip up to the cloud. It's just not necessarily going device to device. and there was no feedback. I could never see, how long is it going to take for this? Why isn't this sync? Can I force this thing to sync now? Can I unsync this particular thing? I felt that it was a lot less transparent, gave me a lot less control. But also, some of the stuff I store in those two folders, desktop and documents, or various subfolders of them, are gigantic files. Like, I use virtual machines. I have all of them that I use for different purposes. I use Parallels Desktop for some things, and VMware Fusion for some things, VirtualBox for some things, and these create like multi-tens of gigabyte files, and that is a huge amount of data to push up to the cloud. And of course, as you're working in one of these virtual machines, I think files are constantly changing. So all this massive amount of data is constantly going up to the cloud and constantly going back down to all your devices. Well, I was hitting data caps on my home broadband connection. I later decided, I'm just going to pay the extra money, quite a lot of extra money, to get the data cap removed. But I mean, this was a big deal for me. I just moving massive amounts of data, so it was costing me more money. It was taking longer, and with less transparency. And I didn't like it. I felt like if you don't have that many documents, and you don't have really large documents in those two folders, and you don't mind sort of the initial awkwardness of the transition to that, well, great. Use it with my blessing. I'm not going to say you shouldn't use it. You can use it. It's fine. But for my use case, given the volume of files in those folders and the size of some of the files, and the fact that I already had a better, faster, and more secure solution that I liked, it just didn't make any sense.
Okay. We will come back to Resilio Sync at some time because I'd love to hear more about that. But we're talking iCloud, so we're going to stay there. Okay, so the obvious question, I think, after getting past those two, because to me those are two potentially big features that people might adopt or might think are useful. So what changes in iCloud precipitated this change in the addition of the book, or would have taken it from even if you hadn't done an interim version? Well,
you and I have had what is about to be the identical conversation about 12 times in the past. So here's what happens, just to review, because everyone who's watched me on one of these shows has heard this before. I think, time to update such and such a book. Well, hardly anything has changed, but I'll just go in and make a few tweaks. It'll be fine. Nothing much. And so I'm like, okay, they'll change that. Oh, actually, this also changed. And I changed that. Oh, shoot, I didn't realize this. And oh, no, not that thing, too. And I just have this series of, and before I know it, it's like more than 1,000 things have changed. I mean, this turned, I thought basically, what I thought was going to happen was basically two things. Number one, folder sharing. We talked about that. I thought, add a thing on folder sharing, that has to be done. Number two, Find My. So, we used to have the Find My iPhone app and the Find My Friends app, and then they got combined. And then that app appeared not only on your iOS, iPad, whatever, but also on Mac. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to modify the Find My Stuff, the Find My Nouns chapter to talk about that. So I knew that there were going to be those two things, and that those were not, they were going to be a bit of work. I didn't realize quite how substantial those two things were going to be. I also knew that, in Catalina, Apple went from having an iCloud pane of system preferences to having an Apple ID pane of system preferences, and then iCloud became a category underneath there. So, okay, fine, that's not a big deal. I had to do some changes. So I knew that I had to do those things, but there were some things that I didn't realize. So what actually happened was a user group that I've spoken at many times before invited me to speak again. So I did, a Zoom thing like we do. And they said, we want you to talk about iCloud. Fine, I've talked about iCloud many times. And they said, our members have some specific questions they would like you to answer. I'm like, great, lay them on me. And they gave me this list of questions. And I'm like, oh, damn. Like, so, even after 6 editions of this book and 2 predecessor books, I realized that this user group had a bunch of perfectly reasonable questions, like questions any normal person would have. These weren't like weird out of left field things. These weren't they weren't dumb questions, they're like, and I looked at their list of questions. I'm like, I do not answer that in this book. I never explained this, and I need to go explain it. So a lot of what happened with this book was kind of realizations that came out of doing that user group presentation, answering all these questions. I'm like, I either didn't explain this well enough, or I didn't explain it at all in this book, and I really need to. And a lot of those questions had to do with iCloud Drive. I mean, people wanted to know the very simple thing, like, okay, how do I tell which of the things on my Mac are only on my Mac and not in the cloud? How do I tell which ones are in both places? And how do I tell which things are only in the cloud and not on my Mac? That isn't obvious. So I explained that, but then there was a follow-up question. It's like, well, okay, I see like there's a file. I go into my iCloud Drive and there's a file there and it has a little cloud icon with the arrow. And it's like, okay, I know that's in the cloud. You've told me that. It's in the cloud. I just have an icon on my Mac. The file isn't on my Mac. Click the icon, it downloads. Great. Now, the opposite of that is, what if I don't want the local copy of this file anymore? I want the original to stay in iCloud, but I don't want the local copy taking up space anymore. How do I get rid of it without dragging the whole thing out of iCloud completely? And Apple doesn't let you do that. Apple has this optimized storage thing where if your Mac starts getting really low on disk space, they don't tell you how low. Apple starts picking files, they don't tell you how they pick the files, to automatically purge the local copies of. But you can't just manually say, no, I want to get rid of the local copy of this file and keep the rest. So, which weirdly, in iCloud for Windows, they do give you that feature. It's built into iCloud for Windows. You can't do it in iCloud for Mac. So I found an app. There's a third-party app that lets you do that. It's not the most elegant app in the world, but it's free. It's called Bailiff, and link to it in the new book. And a little menu bar thing, and you say you go to this menu, you choose evict. Evict. That's the word. So you find the file that's in your iCloud Drive that you want to keep the icon there. You want to keep the file in iCloud, but you want to evict your local copy, and then it does that for you. So that's great. There's a solution now. But it's something like I hadn't really thought about before. So there's a whole bunch of things like that, and then a whole bunch of littler changes, like the Windows iCloud app had quite a few changes to it. There were some changes to the iCloud website which were not evident at first glance that I had to document. Some changes to the Apple TV experience of using iCloud that I had to document. Some like changes to keychain, and so it's like when I'm redoing the book, I have to try everything again. I have to go back over every single thing, even things that I'm pretty sure are exactly the same because they've been the same for 6 or 7 years. And I look at something, that changed. So there were just there were a few really big categories of changes, and then there were just like all those little things. But I will say, as I was writing this book, Big Sur and iOS 14, iPadOS 14 aren't shipping yet, but they are in public beta. So I did try out everything in the book with the betas, and I noticed a few differences. Not much. I mean, Apple could always surprise us later with more stuff, but I was able to make notes about and if you're going to be using Big Sur, this will be a little bit different, those kinds of things. So hopefully by doing that now, shortly before these new operating systems ship, I'm hoping that will give this edition sort of longer shelf life, because I have at least validated that so far, as of the betas we have now, this stuff is still accurate.
Joe Kissell will be back in the next edition of MacVoices to wrap up his discussion of Take Control of iCloud 7th edition. He'll talk about why this version of iCloud is probably the best one out there, even though it's not quite perfect yet. It's still the best that there has been. He'll also talk about how in the book he covers some of the iOS apps and Apple apps that use iCloud as their central hub. That's all next time on MacVoices. Until then, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.